I'm thrilled to be here today, and I'm Ziad, and I will be talking a little bit about what my journey has been like as a young person, but I'm not that young anymore, to get me to this moment, right? And I think we're here today to talk about hope. I think it says it there, hope. And what, if anything, this word really means to me as I'm navigating my 20-somethings adulthood. So I'll start with a bit of a story about how I ended up here, and then I'll talk a little bit about my reflections on my journey, and then maybe some advice I would have given to my younger self, or I would give to my younger self. So I'm from Princeton, New Jersey, which I consider to be the greatest town on earth, and I was really privileged and lucky to grow up in Princeton, New Jersey. And I grew up in a world where, as you know, it's not always easy to be young, right? To be alive. And where your schools, your communities might otherize you, right? And make you feel lesser than or smaller than. And as an American Muslim, as a person of color, as a progressive, I saw how in my school communities, kids were being otherized. That oftentimes we're put into these boxes that feel like we don't belong, right? That society wants us to be something that we don't, or society expects us to be something that we aren't. And I certainly saw that happening in my own environment. Right? I went to an all-boys school, an all-boys Catholic school growing up, and I switched to a co-ed secular school when I was in 7th grade. And that transition was really pivotal for me because I grew up in a household of all girls, right? My parents were separated when I was young, and I went to an all-boys school, right? And so when I was at home, if my sisters were playing Barbies, so was I, right? Because it was all girls things, right? And at school, there was no sense of boys things or girls things. When you did theater or sports, it was all boys things because there was only boys. And suddenly, when I switched schools to this co-ed secular school when I was in 7th grade, I was confronted with this reality that there was this presumption that because of who society or how society thought gender should exist, we were put into these boxes. And all boys were expected to talk about was girls and sports, right? And I was this is the best we can do? This is the most interesting conversation we can have? I don't think so. And I began to challenge that and look around my school hallways in the ways that people were being put in these boxes that didn't feel right, that didn't feel true, that didn't feel genuine. And I think oftentimes in these school environments, kids are made to feel lesser than, not because other kids are operating out of malice, but out of ignorance, in the sense that we're not always equipped to know how to talk to people who come from vastly different backgrounds or have vastly different interests. And so I saw this playing out and anticipated that it might only get worse in high school, and started this nonprofit at the end of 8th grade called Redefy, with our mission statement being to defy stereotypes and to redefine perspectives positively. Built on this idea that I believe it's really hard to hate somebody you know, right? You might really not like, some kid in your grade, and then you have to do a school project together, and you might be wait, they don't actually suck, right? I actually kind of like them. When you spend time with people, right? When you get to know people, you usually realize that there's something about them that you connect with, something about them that's redeemable. But I don't think that sometimes, I think often we don't have opportunity to tell our story to each other, to humanize our perception of the other. And so that's what Redefy was really about, this idea that perhaps if we told our stories to each other, we might like each other a little more. Our school environments might feel a little bit more inclusive, might feel a little bit more like home. And so God started doing that, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was a presumptuous, overzealous, 13-year-old who thought I could change the world, and I got started, and I had no idea what I was doing. I troubleshot, and I'll date myself. So the way that we launched, the year was 2013. The social media platforms at the time that were most popular, some of these you will not have even heard of, were Ask FM and Skype. And it was the early days of Instagram when you couldn't yet tag people in your picture. There was no such thing as Instagram stories. It was a very different era of the internet. And today, we have an era of infographics where people share a lot of content to their story to advocate for the issues that they want to talk about. But at the time, that's not really how me and my communities were using Instagram. But it was really the way that we might use our spam or Finstas today, was all we had back then, right? Was just to post selfies, right? Or to chronicle our lives in real time. But I saw this opening, this opportunity to talk about current events, to talk about identity because it matters to us. It impacts us in a day-to-day sense, and oftentimes we're not given the space, the place, the agency to talk about these things or do anything about them. And so we got started, and on Ask FM and on Skype and on Instagram, people were sharing it. And it was 2013, and we got 1,000 hits on our WordPress website the day we launched. And in today's numbers, that doesn't feel like very much, but at the time, it felt like the world was watching, the world was listening. And I couldn't believe it. I didn't think, right, that there was really audience here. I just thought like maybe this would be like a small side project, and it grew organically in the sense that as we launched, a lot of kids reached out to me and was like, this is what I've been waiting for, how can I get involved? And I was like, I don't know how you can get involved, I guess I have to figure it out. And so I did. And so we did. And it grew, and I ended up finding myself in rooms that I never could have imagined. My life sort of changing overnight, instantaneously. From my perspective, I was a privileged, random kid from Princeton, New Jersey, and I need to underscore that so much of my story is rooted in my privilege. The fact that I had access, right, to people around me who could help me in my journey, the fact that I did not have to provide for my family, the fact that I had a computer in 4th grade, was unique and allowed me to be able to do these things, to have the agency to do them. But to me, I was like a random kid, right? Rooted in that privilege for sure, but I never thought for a second that it would lead me to this stage or any stage. And I got started and ended up in these rooms, and so I was in sophomore year of high school, so a little bit younger than you are now, and I got an email from MTV News. And like they wanted to do a profile on me and redefine. I was like, this is wild, right? Like I couldn't believe it. And then it ran, and it ended up being particularly shared by the Muslim community, Bangladeshi community, because those are the communities that I come from, in that people saw themselves, right? And saw perhaps that we could trigger some change. And I ended up the next day having an unknown missed call in chemistry class. And I come home, and on my computer, I get an email, and it was like, you missed a call from the White House. And I was like, I did what? Like, I don't remember that part. And a Bangladeshi Muslim American staffer, to my knowledge, the only hijab-wearing woman at the time who'd worked in the West Wing, read my story and wanted to get me involved in the stuff that the White House was doing. And suddenly I found myself at a dinner table with President Barack Obama, who is from the great state of Illinois. And I was like, what, 15, 16 years old at the time, and if you told me now that it didn't happen, I'd believe you. And not to say that he was the perfect president, or not to say that that moment changed everything, but it was a moment for me of like, wow, maybe anything is possible, right? Like, I didn't think I'd end up here. And I left that moment believing that I believe that every student deserves a moment of validation that precious, but also, I think you guys are probably familiar with the construct of imposter syndrome, right? This idea that you enter these spaces, and maybe you're made to feel like you don't belong, that you're not good enough, that you didn't earn your seat at the table. And I, if I'm being honest with you, felt whatever the opposite of imposter syndrome is. I walked into a lot of these rooms, and I was like, these are the people in charge? Like, this is the best that we can do? And I don't say that, right, to like shame any one person or institution, but to say that there were no people who looked like me, who sounded like me, right? There were no young people around the room. Oftentimes I'd be in these conversations with decision makers, with politicians, and I'd be the youngest person in the room by 2 decades, but the conversation was about young people. And I was like, if I couldn't make it today, like who was your expert? Right? Who was speaking from the first person perspective on what is happening right now? Because at 23, like I have no idea what it's like to be you. I was just sitting with my table over there with my new besties and learning about what it is like to be them right now. It is not what it was like to be me at 16 or 18. And so it's important, right, that we hear from a first person narrative in real time. We learn in like the 2nd grade that a primary source is the best source. And then somehow along the way, we obscure that. We start depending on data points to substitute for meaningful engagement and conversation with community. And so we end up erasing and minimizing the voices of so many marginalized communities. And so with that in mind, these experiences, I ended up starting a company when I was a junior in high school. Again, I had no idea what I was doing. I never thought I'd still be doing it now. I don't know that I wanted to. But I started this company with this idea in mind that I believe the world looks better when diverse young people have a seat at the table. And I believe the expert on any reality is the person closest to that reality, and I believe that we don't lean into that enough. And so I started this company with this idea. Didn't know what marketing was. Didn't know what a holding company was, what a CMO was. Maybe some of those things are new to you. Now, that's very much so my industry. Danny from my team knows that we use those words at Truth Consulting now, words that I did not know then. But I thought it'd be this little side project. Something that should exist in the world. If people wanted to reach diverse young people, perhaps they should talk to diverse young people was the basic premise. And then it ended up really taking off because, as I hope you know and as I hope you feel, the voices of diverse young people matter. Set the trends that everybody else follows and have the capacity to transform public discourse and popular culture instantaneously with the content that we are producing and with our collective voices coming together to meaningfully shift the dialogue and shift the conversation on issues that matter deeply to us and our communities. And so we talk off. And today, I went to college, studied social media's impact on policy making, but almost 7 years later now, we're kind of like a real company. I have 30 full-time employees. I have employees with kids, which is surreal and bizarre. And we have a vibrant student network of people that we work with some of the coolest and biggest clients in the world to really center the voices of diverse young people to hopefully co-create things that actually resonate with us, that actually empower us. And that's what I spend most of my days doing, is running this business. And of course, like I'm sure many of you, I have qualms with business and critiques of system and state, and I am constantly challenged by my day-to-day insofar as, is this the best that I can be doing? Right? And is this the best use of my time? And the answer is, as I sit before you today, I don't know. And that's what I mostly want to talk about today, is the sense of I don't know. One could look at my story, or look at, anyone like me and people who have done a lot more than me and who are far smarter and cooler than I am, and expect I'm really proud. And in some ways I am. We've done some cool things. I've gotten to be in some cool spaces with y'all today. But when I look back, I would do it differently. I would not make the same choices again. I spent a lot of time caring more about being right than being kind. I spent a lot of time feeling like the world's weight was on my shoulders and I had to fix it all right now and do it all right now. And so I worked maniacally hard and slept 3 hours a night throughout high school, and it wasn't healthy, and I wasn't a good friend, and I wasn't a good brother, and I wasn't a good son. And I did that because I felt like I had to do this right now for these 4 years, and the next 4 years, work maniacally hard, and then you graduate and you're like, what was I working that hard for maniacally all the time? I have 80 more years left of this, maybe? That's a long time. It's a really long time. A lot of time to perhaps change your world, the world, yourself. And my point in saying that is that I think I spent a lot of time in this mindset that you're either nothing or you're everything. This idea that we have to get the grades, right? And at least not fall over while you're on the field, because I was not particularly athletically inclined, right? And have a good relationship and have friends and be all these things, right? All of the time. And excel in every possible vertical. And if I fail in any one of them, suddenly I feel like I'm a failure, right? Even if I'm thriving in 3 others and I'm maybe not where I want in 2, I'm I have failed. That's often how I felt. I'm either everything or I'm nothing. And as I sit before you at 23 today, stand before you, not sit before you, I will be sitting soon. But I have more questions and less answers than I've ever had in my life. When I was your age, I could tell you exactly who I wanted to be when I grew up and what I wanted to change. And I have no idea now. I don't really know if I'm making the best choices every day, and I don't really know a lot of things. And where I am right now is I'm really trying to lean in and to believe that while I believe endlessly in the capacity of our generation to change the world, we don't have to right now today. We can and we should, but it can happen tomorrow and the next day, and it can happen with each of us playing our part rather than all of it resting on any one of us. And this idea that I'm not nothing, and I don't want to be everything, I'm okay just being something. And maybe something is good enough. And something is still effort, something is still trying, something is not abandoning these goals, these dreams, these hopes, these aspirations. But it's this idea that I get to not be all things all of the time. Like, I get to visualize myself running and being like, wait, I can take a water break. I can maybe jog sometimes. I can maybe look back and see who I've left behind and run backwards to carry them forward with me. And what good is running if I don't know what direction I'm going? Because when I trip, is it that I was not running fast enough, that I wasn't running well enough, or was it that I was running in the wrong direction? And to think about it in that way, to be like, I am trying to teach myself to be okay with jogging. That like we should be okay with jogging. And that looks like a million different things for every single person. And like I'm asked a lot of like what advice I'd give to young people. I'm like, I don't have any to offer. I have advice that I'd offer my younger self because like I don't know your circumstance. And I also wouldn't advise doing what I did. I'm tired all the time. I'm not necessarily the happiest person, right? Like there are a million metrics to optimize your life on. And there are a million ways to be a fulfilling, like to be a fulfilled, good person, right? I don't think there is one path or one journey. But I think as I look around the world today, like with everything that is wrong with it, young people are everything that is right with it. And we just saw that in the midterm elections, right? And what I find hope in is this idea that we don't have to wait our turn, like it gets to be now. That these issues impact us right now, and we get to claim the microphone and pass the microphone and say just because things have been this way doesn't mean they have to stay this way. And we get to do that right now. But I also find hope in this idea that we don't have to make ourselves smaller to do that, but we also have to trap ourselves to do that. We get to change our minds. We get to take a break. We get to try without that trying burning us out. And that is my sincere hope, is that that is possible. That we can look at our world and say, this is what I'd fix, and this is how I'd fix it, and we're gonna work together on a sustainable timeline to do so. I'm being told to wrap up by our friendly timers. And so what I would like to finish and conclude by saying is that I am so grateful to be here. And I'm so grateful to be like in and amongst so many young, bright minds who care earnestly about where we're headed and where we are. And I'm excited to now do a little activity with you guys to help actualize that. And not to say that I'm an expert on any of this, but to say that collectively, we can perhaps come to some solutions. And so thank you for being here. Thank you for being my sense of hope in a world that is often not that hopeful. And hopefully this was entertaining, illuminating, interesting in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, thank you, and we'll get into our activity now. But that's me. Cool. So we're gonna do an activity, but I don't know, am I allowed to ask for questions? But, well, that's fine. Well, we'll see. But my activity is as follows. I think oftentimes, as I was just saying, things feel very heavy and things feel very big and impossible. And like, I feel that way a lot. I'm like, am I just shouting in the dark? Is anyone listening to me? Like, does it even matter? I don't know that I've answered any of those questions. But I think sometimes making the heavy light, right, and making the intangible tangible is really helpful, right? To like orient ourselves in a sense of like, okay, this is where we like maybe should be going. So what I would like everyone to do is to grab a paper on your table, grab a pen on your table, and I would like for everyone to do two things, like quietly to yourself, and then I'll give you like 2 minutes to do it, and then we'll talk about it. I want everyone to write down on one side of the paper one thing that is wrong with the world. One thing that is wrong with your world. Like, if there is one problem and you could fix it, what is that problem? And that could be something as small or as private as something in your home or in your school, or something as big and systemic as government. There is no right or wrong answer. It is what comes to mind. And I want what comes to mind first, because it's the most honest answer. Like, what is one thing, what is one problem that you want to fix, that when you're at night and you're being like, damn, like that problem is keeping me up. I don't know if I was allowed to curse, I apologize. But like one thing that you want to fix, that you want to change. And then on the other side of the paper, I want you to write one thing that you could conceptualize of doing to fix that thing. Again, could be like as small as like having a conversation about it to like as big as starting a movement to address it. And like anything along the spectrum or in the gradient. There are no right, there are no wrong, there are no bad, there are no good answers. These are honest answers. These are the things that matter to you and your communities. These are the things that keep you up at night in the goals and dreams that you have for yourselves and your communities. And I believe and I know to be true from the work that I do with young people that you have answers. That there are things that you want to change about the world. There are things that you want to change about your world. That the status quo likely is not working for most of you, if not all of you. Okay, now talk amongst your tables about, if you feel comfortable sharing with your tables, around like maybe there's some overlap between the problems, right? Maybe there's some difference of opinion on the solutions. I want you to talk quickly to each other about what you wrote down, and then we'll circle back up. So for like 2-3 minutes, talk amongst yourselves. Introduce yourselves if you don't know each other, become friends.
I wrote as my solution, I like to pick up trash when I see it.
Okay.
And then I drew a little image of me throwing the trash into the trash can.
Connor,
Because that's what I do.
I picked something a little darker than that. I picked domestic abuse
Oh,
was
no.
the first thing that came to mind. My answer was increasing awareness, along with creating places and safe spaces for people to go with people who believe them and try to help them. Because that's something we need right now.
I said systemic racism.
Jesus. I literally, you guys have these.
I kind of talked about something that you could do kind of locally. So I said conversations with local lawmakers while voicing opinions to hopefully come to an understanding for future laws.
I said economic inequality.
Nice.
I went a little bit more extreme. I said socialism or another progressive revolution.
You guys are thinking a lot
I love
larger
that.
scale than I
We were
am.
pretty wide.
I
out.
mean,
just like
he
trash
said you
is
can go as
bad.
small or as
Then
big
it-
as you
then
want, and
we
we
went-
both
And something
went.
that
I went
upsets you.
trash, then we went economy, racism, and
Domestic
abuse.
Yeah.
abuse, you know?
Very, very.
Well, he said the
different
first
ideas.
thing that came to mind.
I mean,
and
that's
that
what
was
came to
it.
your mind.
This
You
was-
know, and you
I
have
mean, I saw a
perspective.
piece of trash earlier, just like floating in the river, and I'm just like,
That was so
really
upsetting.
makes me mad.
Okay, I think we're gonna circle back up now. I know you're not done, that's okay. But in the interest of time, we're gonna circle back up now. And what I would like to do is, I imagine or suspect that perhaps as you were thinking through this exercise, there were some roadblocks, right, or some obstacles about like how would I actually go about solving this thing, right, or what is feasible, or what is practical, right, or like what would stop me, what would be my barrier. I think that's often like the mindset of like why it would be so hard to take the first step. And I think it really is hard to take the first step, especially based on circumstance and privilege and access to resources and opportunity, which is not distributed equally and it ought to be, right? And so what I would like to do now is for you all to ask me maybe some questions about some of the things that you guys talked about, right? In regards to what we think, and we can problem solve out loud together, we can do to solve them. So I'd love for people to share out maybe some of those obstacles and ask any questions that you might have about the topic or the solution or crowdsource opinions on maybe what we can do to solve these things that we care about.
My name is Jenny, and
Jenny?
Yes.
Are you the TikToker? That's my TikTok, yes! We have to make content later.
So one of the
Why are we not filming? Someone film Jenny so she can put it on TikTok.
one of the biggest issues I've come across with is animal abuse, and I say a solution could be starting a movement to begin change, because I feel like since I personally like animals, I feel like there should be a movement to like change animal abuse.
Yeah. No, I think that's an important issue, one that a lot of people care about. My whole For You page is just cats. I love cat talk. So, I mean, speaking like, not to put you on the spot, but I heard from the grapevine that you're pretty well known around here, that you have a bit of a platform. on social media. And that can oftentimes be a powerful conduit for change making, right? In terms of being able to connect with other people, right? Who might really also care about animal rights, right? And ending animal abuse, and creating content to that effect can have a ripple effect on how people, right? How many people engage with animal shelters or, organizations that are meaningfully trying to address this problem. But I think that's an issue that feels very actionable, right? A lot of people have pets. A lot of people have sympathies towards animals. And galvanizing people through content. I mean, the dodo does a great job of making me love animals. And I feel like that's a broadly applicable, solution. Other sharers, questions, comments, concerns? Yes, another one at this table. We love this table. Thank you, besties.
Hi, my name's Rosie. And
Rosie.
Hi.
Lovely to meet you, Rosie.
Lovely to meet you. I said systemic racism.
That's a big topic and a really good one to put down.
And I said that something that could help, that we could all do, would be having conversations with local lawmakers, or even on social media, just simply like DMing them or like going in their comments or something, while voicing opinions to hopefully come to an understanding.
I love that. I think that, again, right, feels like a big issue, right? That impacts every space, everything that we do, right? Like, we operate within and live within places that are systemically racist, right? That is a truth of society as we know it, right? And making that a tangible solution, right? Where you can be like, okay, that is a truth, but I have the agency to start conversations with people who have power right now, right? I think is super, super, super relevant. And again, like something that anyone could do. Like anyone can DM their congressperson. And what I would also encourage, I said this recently in another talk that I did virtually, I like really wish for a world where we can name more of our local elected officials than we can the Kardashians, right? And like, I bet most of us in this room could name all the siblings and their kids. Maybe not most, but many of us, right? How many of us could name our assembly people or school board members, right? Or Congress people, the people that have the power to change what books are taught in schools, to change what policies police are enacting against communities of color, to change the way that racism operates in our communities. And so I think absolutely leveraging our agency to start those conversations with those people in power and naming them, knowing them, I think is half the battle. Really, even know, yeah, please.
So as we get older, because we're all seniors, and slowly, we just recently had our first Gen Z, like
Maxwell Frost, I was with him on Saturday. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So as we move into these positions, how can we change what's already been set up? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
How can we break down those walls when just coming in as like this youngster, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not easy, right? And like, I'm in a lot of rooms every day that like don't feel comfortable, that don't feel like they want to listen to me or anyone who I care about or who looks like me or sounds like me. And there is a huge inertia, right, to the status quo that is really hard to disrupt, to reorient, to pivot. But I think the only way that we can is through groundswell, right? Is through, if we think about like where we are as a society right now, like the way that politicians talk, right? The way that decision makers talk is absolutely, and I studied a lot of this, being shaped by what people are saying in social media, on what constituents are demanding of them as people in power. And so the more that we say, hey, the rhetoric as is not working for us, it needs to look like this, the more that they're gonna pivot. And that's not gonna happen, 180 overnight. We're gonna get like 1 degree a year, and it's gonna be slow, and hopefully we can make it faster, right? And hopefully we can make it pivot more. Right? But like, it works, right? We know this to be true. We know that Black communities, queer communities, right, have been organizing for generations and demonstrably have made huge gains for our communities broadly, right? And so we know that organizing works, right? We know that showing up for the issues that we care about work. And we know that there's nothing more powerful than uniting with others who share our mindsets to hopefully reorient. But what I would also say is the thing what Gen Z is doing a lot of is saying, okay, and then there's lots of different ways to make change. Voting is one instrument in our toolbox, right? Organizing is another instrument in our toolbox. But a lot of people are saying, wait, the table wasn't built for me. If the table wasn't built for people who look like me or love like me, then I don't want it. I don't want a seat at the table. I'm gonna flip it and build a new one. And so a lot of young people are building new infrastructure, new architecture, new institutions, right? And so what that looks like is saying, okay, like the powers that be don't wanna listen to us. What does it look like for us to be the powers that be? What does it look like for us to build capacity, to build community in and amongst each other, such that we can actually achieve the world that we want to live in?